How's everybody doing? Welcome back to another great reaction video. Today I'm going to be doing a reaction to the Eggnog Riot. It's kind of a interesting story in American history, and it is put on by Extra History. I'll be leaving the link in the comment section below, description below, to go if you want to go there and watch the original and not with my commentary on top of it. So without further ado, we are going to get started in the Eggnog Riot.
U.S. Military Academy, West Point, New York, 1826. 'Twas the night before Christmas, about second watch, when cadets were preparing for a festive debauch. They stirred up some yolks, cream, and cinnamon roots, and produced hidden booze from footlockers and boots. They whipped at the mixture to thicken the nog, then tipped in 3 gallons of moonshine and grog. They toasted the season while keeping things quiet. And 11 toasts later, came the Great Eggnog Riot.
I thoroughly enjoy their videos. This is why I do a lot of reactions to these guys' videos. They do a phenomenal job in their research and just their little clips and stuff. They're really, really good. The Eggnog Riot, yeah, I mean, who would have thought about this one? I've known about this, but anytime you get young kids together, especially like at West Point, they're not like they are today where they were like, 18, 19 when they start. Back in those days, you could have 14, 15-year-olds in the same one. So think about it, like high school freshmen would be going to West Point, like equivalency of today. So, but Extra History, great channel. Get a chance, go to subscribe to these guys. They do an amazing job.
Thanks so much to Tab for a Cause for supporting great charities. Find out how you can help for free after the episode. Eggnog, a beloved holiday beverage. Creamy and sweet, kind of like a knit sweater in drink form, Essentially harmless. Unless you were drinking it in 19th century America, when it would get you totally trashed. Back then, eggnog incorporated all that was cheap and plentiful in the early American Republic.
I don't know about you guys. Eggnog I can do a little bit, but boy, you have more than one cup. It's pretty filling. I know some people that just despise the taste and texture. I'm not a drinker, so I don't think I've ever had eggnog with alcohol in it, but there are people that you go to these Christmas parties. Geez Louise, some of these people are crazy.
Eggs and milk from dairy farms, sugar from the Caribbean Triangle trade, and who could forget huge amounts of alcohol. George Washington went hard with his own recipe, calling for a pint of brandy, a half pint of rum, a half pint of rye whiskey, and a quarter pint of sherry. Wow.
A lot of people don't realize, George Washington actually made alcohol at Mount Vernon. He did a lot of things, farming and business and development and stuff, but he also had a number of stills, and he was a big producer of whiskey and other spirits at Mount Vernon.
But with this mixture, he led his guests in giving toast after toast after toast after toast, draining the glass each time. Yeah, turned out getting blitzed at the holidays was kind of an American custom, which is why, in 1826, dozens of West Point cadets defied the orders of Superintendent Sylvanus Thayer and brewed up a batch of boozy eggnog on their own. Now, Thayer ran West Point on a strict disciplinary regime. Actually, he'd been brought in for that purpose, appointed in 1817 to reform the then failing institution. He introduced a regimented schedule, physical exercise, a new focus on engineering, a 4-year curriculum, and a series of demerits. Basically, anything you...
And he was credited with bringing West Point up to kind of the modern standards that it's now. Obviously, this is almost 200 years ago. But prior to this, West Point was just a small little school training a handful of officers. A lot of the officers were being trained by inexperienced officers or officers that maybe were a career but really didn't do much with their career. So it's interesting. But yeah, he's given credit as basically the person that turned West Point into what it is today, where they're doing physical fitness and training and all this other stuff, where it was more before that was getting a bad rep because they were doing more book work and not so much in the field stuff.
You imagine when you hear the words West Point. And that also included a strict code of conduct, which forbid cadets from purchasing, possessing, and drinking alcohol. At first, Thayer made exceptions for holidays. Cadets could drink on the 4th of July and Christmas. But Independence Day 1825 had turned into a drunken embarrassment, with cadets performing a snake dance and carrying Major William Worth, the popular commandant of cadets, back to their barracks. An unacceptable loss of military bearing. So
I mean, we've all been there. We've all seen this crazy stuff happen. I mean, these are kids, come and be officers, but yeah, they're going to do things like this. But I get his point with the bearing. That must have been something to see.
now, Thayer had banned alcohol totally, and for the Christmas of 1826, the eggnog would be served bone dry. Yet Thayer's still worried that someone, somewhere, was having a good time. That's why, at his personal Christmas party on December 23rd, 1826, Thayer pulls Major Worth aside into a quiet corner to discuss rumors he's heard that cadets are smuggling in alcohol. And he even has a chief suspect, Cadet Jefferson Davis. Yup, that Jefferson Davis. As in later president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis.
But a lot of people don't realize, too, that Jefferson Davis was not just the Confederate president. He was also a senator. He was a military officer, obviously, because he went to West Point. He was he was in the cabinet position of the president. So, I mean, he had done a lot of things. So he's not just known as the Confederate president, although that's what he's mainly known at today. So he was basically an up and coming star at this point in his life.
Turns out Davis is the worst drunk at the school, notorious for sneaking out to taverns. In fact, he'd just gotten out of the hospital after an incident where he'd been stumbling back in the dark and fallen down a 60-foot ravine. Needless to say, Davis was a bad influence, a rebel, though not like that teacher's pet Robert E. Lee, of course, who showed up at Thayer's office at 7 a.m. that morning to discuss trigonometry homework. Regardless, Thayer tells Worth that instructors staying in the barracks, Captain Hitchcock and Lieutenant Thornton, should definitely keep on the lookout. And boy, was he right to be concerned. For even as Thayer spoke, a batch of contraband eggnog was already brewing in the North Barracks. For weeks, cadets had been felching ingredients and food from the mess hall. And sure enough, Jefferson Davis was one of the instigators. The most intrepid.
I often wonder when Davis became president of the Confederacy, if this was ever a topic of conversation, what had happened here. I mean, obviously, this story is almost 200 years old, so obviously it had been brought up at some point in his life, as well as his time in the military or as a senator or such like that. How often was this brought up?
But of which had ventured out to barter for alcohol at nearby taverns, but finding the prices too expensive for the sheer quantity they needed. 4 cadets had crossed the Hudson River where prices were cheaper. They finally settled on 2 gallons of cheap, barely aged moonshine whiskey. But they ran into trouble on the way back when they found a U.S. Army private guarding the West Point dock. So, whispering amongst themselves, they made a plan, scrapping together all of the money they had left for a bribe. 35 cents, which worked. Man, Zoe, corruption used to be so affordable. Freaking inflation. So back at the barracks, they poured the whiskey into the mix, along with a gallon of rum from another cadet. This was their act of resistance, a statement proving that Thayer couldn't take away their boozy, deeply unhealthy traditions. Oh yes, tomorrow they would toast and get toasted. Christmas Eve, the North Barracks, 11:59.
And let's also remember that these guys here were from all over the United States, or what was the United States at that time. So it wasn't like today where we could jump on a plane to be home for Christmas. A lot of these, these young cadets were from very, very far away. I'm sure some went home at Christmas. It depended on, where they lived. But, if you were like in New York City or Boston, maybe Philadelphia, you might have went home at this point. But if you were from someplace like Georgia or South Carolina, Virginia, you probably might not have went home just because of how far the trek was and how long it would take you to get back and forth.
9 p.m. All is quiet when Captain Hitchcock makes his final night patrol. Seems like Thayer's worries were unfounded. Whatever's happening, at least it's staying quiet. He and Thornton go to bed. But in room 28, the holiday nog bar is open, baby! Cadets are stealthing in to get their drink, then spilling into the nearby room to toast. But the party has been going on for hours, and the mix is getting a little thin. That is until a Christmas miracle, when a cadet returns from a midnight run with another gallon of whiskey. Hey!
There's always that guy, there's always that guy that's going to show up at the party where where everything's running out and people just want to drink some more, and there's always that guy that has like some sort of hidden batch or has his hand on something. So yeah, it's nice to see even our ancestors had that one guy that always comes through.
Hey, wait, did I say miracle? I meant catastrophe, because this is where things start to go downhill. At 4 a.m. Christmas morning, Hitchcock awakes to such a clatter that he sprang from his bed to see what was the matter, which was, of course, 2 floors above him, a ton of singing, stomping, and shouting, just full-on revelry. He crashes the party and finds 6 cadets in a single room, and he's halfway through ordering them all back to their beds when he hears another commotion next door. And what Hitchcock finds in that room is both pathetic and hilarious. 3 cadets completely blitzed. 2 cower under a blanket, while another tries to, and I kid you not, hide his identity by putting a hat over his face, which works.
I've actually seen people do this. I don't tell too many personal stories on the channel, but when I was much younger man, I was at a party with a guy I was in the Army with, and he actually, somebody came to a house and we weren't supposed to be there, and we all ducked behind couches and sofas and everything, and he actually just was a tall, skinny guy, took a lampshade, and he just stood there with a lampshade on his head. He goes, "I'm a lamp," and hoped nobody would find him.
Exactly as well as you'd expect it would. Hitchcock berates them, ordering them back to their rooms. But the mood among the cadets starts to turn here a little. They're not cowed, they're angry. I mean, how dare he try to stop their deep-seated and wholesome tradition of celebrating the Messiah's birth by getting utterly annihilated on cream drinks laced with cheap rot gut, huh? And just as things start heating up, Hitchcock hears another roar downstairs and heads for the stairwell. Upon his exit, a cadet then makes a drunken decree. Get your dirks and bayonets and pistols if you got them. Before the night's over, Hitchcock will be dead. Meanwhile, on the ground floor, Hitchcock bursts into room 5. And it's crammed with cadets, more than the upstairs party. They all go still and turn to him. Then, with just the most impeccable timing, the opposite door slams open, and Jefferson Davis staggers in completely faced and shouts.
Could you imagine that? Like, I mean, this poor officer that's left on duty to rile these kids up, to get them calmed down, and then all of a sudden you go down to the second floor, there's another party, and then Jefferson Davis comes kicking the back door in.
You should put away the grog, boys. Captain Hitchcock is coming. He then presumably adds a, oh. Hitchcock reads the cadets the riot act, legally informing them they must disperse. He then specifically orders Davis to go back to his room and stay there. Davis does, and passes out in bed, thereby missing the rest of the festivities as the building descends into chaos. Dozens of drunk, belligerent cadets seize weapons. Then, when Hitchcock comes across a locked room, he kicks down the door, only to find himself looking down the barrel of a pistol. The powder jets in his face, but another cadet has slammed into the first cadet holding the gun, knocking off his aim. The bullet then explodes in the doorframe next to Hitchcock's head. Lieutenant Thornton.
I mean, talk about things getting out of hand. It's one thing to sneak into alcohol and then have multiple parties, and then now you're trying to kill one of your commanding officers, and he physically walks in. That's stuff to a totally different level. There has to be more behind this story than them just being drunk. There had to be some sort of too strict of a discipline, or people taking advantage and abusing other people. That's what I'm thinking. Because like they said, alcohol is the truth serum. So if somebody's going to act something out, it's usually based off something. It's not like that.
Thornton, now awake, was doing no better. He tried to gain control of one group, only to be menaced with a sword. And then when he turned down a stairwell, another cadet knocked him out cold with a piece of wood. Hitchcock ran to a cadet on guard duty and told him to get the Commandant Major Worth. He was popular with the cadets and they might listen to him. Only here's where things get really twisted, because some of the rioting cadets misheard what Hitchcock said and thought that he'd called for regular artillery soldiers that were stationed at West Point. The generally upper-class cadets hated those lowly rank-and-file soldiers, and now what, Hitchcock wanted them to come and shell the barracks or something? Just no, absolutely not. No. The sloshed youths broke out their weapons.
Well, at some point, if things are getting out of hand, I mean, obviously that wasn't what was said, but if things are getting out of hand, you got to call out the guard. I mean, if you're shooting people or shooting at people with pistols and drunk and tearing apart the place, or somebody's got to come in and check it out and take care of things.
weapons in full and started fortifying the building. They besieged Hitchcock in his room, throwing stones and pieces of wood at his windows, and they broke everything. They tore banisters off the stairs, shattered windows, and smashed all of the cookery. By the time Major Worth arrived just before 6 a.m., the eggnog was beginning to wear off. And when he called for morning formation, the mutineers actually staggered out, sheepish and ill, making a ragged line under the cruel Christmas dawn. 90 cadets.
And that is when you know, oh, when you wake up that next morning and you're all hungover and beat up, and they got you. That's it. The 10 feet tall and bulletproof has worn off at that point.
1/3 of the student body took part in the Eggnog Riot. But since expelling 1/3 of the school would have been a major embarrassment, they decided to only court-martial the 20 worst offenders. Since he'd gone to bed, Jefferson Davis escaped charges and was instead confined to barracks for...
Imagine dodging that bullet. Jefferson Davis, the worst one, and because just out of pure drunkenness, he lays down, he passes out, misses the whole thing, and he's not one of the guys. I mean, he gets a little smack on the wrist.
For 6 weeks, meaning that despite helping instigate the party, he largely dodged consequences. And Robert E. Lee, who had not participated, testified on behalf of the accused cadets, using his reputation as an honorable gentleman to launder his comrades' actions. This would...
Robert E. Lee's an interesting guy, too, at West Point, because he's, I think, the only person, and maybe there was one more, but I think he's the only person to graduate from West Point to never have a demerit ever. Through his whole career there. I heard there might be one more. I'm not 100% sure on that. If you know who that is, comment below, leave their information below, because I'd love to do a video on them. But yeah, Robert E. Lee was known for that.
To put it lightly, become a reoccurring theme in both of their lives. Ultimately, 9 cadets were permanently expelled. Their careers ruined so badly that 2 of them later became Confederate generals and one the Texas Secretary of State. Though another disgraced candidate spent most of his life entangled with the legal system, eventually serving 8 years as a justice on the Supreme Court. Oh man, Zoe, for a second I was worried someone was going to learn something and there was going to be accountability, but...
So could you imagine in today's world with social media, you have a number of people that go on to prominence in the Confederate Army, a member of the state government, a Supreme Court justice, all were expelled for drinking, somebody shooting at an officer, and these are the worst ones. So you would never be able to get away with that today. But you know what they say, 20 years ago, I'm glad I was a kid because cell phones weren't around as much.
Thank you so much for keeping the status quo. USA, USA. Hold on. This is strong. Actually, though, perhaps one thing was learned. Because these days, things happen a little bit different at West Point, as they send their cadets home for the holidays. So, if they happen to, say, get drunk and smash all the dishes, you know what? At least it's at their own family's house.
Well, like I was saying earlier in the video, today it's a lot easier. You can you drive a car, you can take a plane, whatever. In these days, what do you have? Horse and buggy? I don't think trains were very prevalent, so you might have been able to, take a boat, a ship. If you live far away, it just wasn't practical.
Wow, Rob, that was a phenomenal story. Thank you for penning the script. David, thank you so much for illustrating this episode. Also, thank you so much to Mac, our audio editor, and the boys over at Devon House Creative who put together the edit. And actually, this brings me to a larger point. I've been drinking eggnog the entire time I've been reading the script, and it has gotten me a little emotional. It is the holidays after all, and I'm the showrunner, and I can do what I want. So I would like to propose a toast. I would like to cheers to everyone who works with us at Extra Credits. You are all wonderful beings, and these shows are ultimately amazing because of you all. I would also like to thank all of the viewers who have been watching with us either this year or over the years. Your support and kind words and just being overall wonderful beings means the absolute world to me.
And that really means a lot to people. Thanking them for their help. I know as a YouTube channel, myself and running multiple channels, I could not do this alone. And I have an amazing team that works with me. I have one of the most dedicated production supervisors ever. And he's been with me for the past 2 years. I've been doing this. So yeah, there's good people, and you got to thank them. And make sure that they're notarized. So that is the Great Eggnog Riot. And if you have any ideas for future videos, make sure to leave them below. If you like this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let everybody know. And we will see you next time.